Roundtable, Global to Local, which is part of the project led by Dr. Emmanuel Georgi, Design for Vulnerable. I welcome our 9 speakers that have a very diverse background, and for sure, it will enrich the discussions regarding the impact of global trends at local communities. And on the other side, how grassroots change makers can make it possible to influence at the global scale. I am María Elena de la Torre. I am the coordinator of the C Lab at the School of Architecture, Art and Design of Tecnológico de Monterrey in Campus Guadalajara. I will be moderating the dialogue and ask each speaker to adjust to the 10-minute defined time. And I will remind you 2 minutes before the time is over. Hopefully, our 7 participations will last 1 hour and 10 minutes. And after that, we will go into breakout rooms. But if we have any questions from the different speakers to others, we will have around 5 to 10 minutes to answer those questions and have a small discussion. So I'm very pleased now to introduce you to Dr. Simón Lucatello. He comes from the Instituto Mora in Mexico. He's a professor, researcher at the Dr. José María Luis Mora Research Institute from CONACYT in Mexico City. He's an associate researcher of the National University of Mexico, UNAM, in climate change research program of various Mexican international programs. He has collaborated with various programs of the United Nations as UNEP, UNODC, UNIDO, and CEPAL, of the European Union with Europe Aid in the Balkans, Central America, and Mexico. He's currently one of the scientists of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. He's the highest global scientific body in climate matters and won the Nobel Prize in 2007, and is in charge of the drafting of the next AR6 report for 2021. So welcome, Dr. Simón Lucatello. We're very glad to hear your presentation. Thank you very much. I think you're in silence if you want to turn on your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw you miss. I'm sorry. I having trouble. So yeah, sorry again. So thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I really like to thank the organizer of the event, Emanuela, and of course the colleagues from the Tec de Monterrey. And it's a great pleasure for me to be here with all of you today. So I'm going to have a presentation at which I'm going to share about climate change, vulnerability, and impacts in the north of Mexico. I have been working on climate change over the past almost 20 years in this part of the world. So I will give you a sort of presentation of about what will be the impacts of, I think, the climate change and adaptation solutions for the case of northern Mexico, where I understand this vulnerability design project is meant to have impacts on. So I'm going to start very simply with the I'm not going to talk too much about this because I guess everybody has heard, of course, know about climate change, but there are a lot of definitions. I wanted to say simply that we are thinking about climate change as an alteration or the change, a statistically significant change of variation on the surface global temperatures, meaning that we are little by little over the past 200 years changing and warming up in terms of having different condition for the climate and the ecosystems in the planet. So there are really several definitions. One is the one from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, which is the body of the scientific body, international body with a lot of influence about the climate change studies. And then, of course, we have the Article 1 by the UN Convention for Climate Change that says that is something that is changing in the climate attributed directly or indirectly to human activity. It's very important to underline the issue of indirectly or directly, because we don't know so much about how we are influencing as a human. We know that we are doing that, but we don't know how much as human activity is really altering and to what extent is really modifying the way we as humans relate with the ecosystem is in our environmental surroundings. So the other thing that we know for sure, by the way, is that we are changing the composition of the atmosphere, which of course is having a lot of other spillover effects around the planet. So the thing is that one of the main points that I would like you to take away today is that climate change has to do, in the case of the human influence, or in an issue of rising temperatures, which is one of the clear impacts that we will see for the northern part of Mexico. I'm anticipating you, but it's we are thinking that in the next 30 to 50 years, even more, even if in 100 years, possibly in the north of Mexico, temperatures will rise between 4 and 6, or even in the worst scenario to 8 degrees Celsius, which means really, really a lot of changes for those who are living in this part of the world, which is already warm by its own nature. So raising temperatures is very important. Let's see over the past 150 years, you can see here in this graph, from 1850 to the modern time, we've been having a clear variation of the climate up, towards raising temperatures. And just to give an example of other general effects before I go down to the northern part of Mexico, this is a very simplified a model about hurricanes intensification and tropical storms who've been hitting last year, 2020. That was very, very a record time for the world global temperatures and for global impacts on storms and hurricanes. So you really can see that not only trajectory, but also the kind of the level of the categories and the strength and the power of those hurricanes, which has been striking the Atlantic and the Pacific. But he is, of course, mostly from the Atlantic. Well, why am I saying that? Because all these things in a very simple way have converged, let's say, into very important kind of impacts that have been identified for several regions of the world. And of course, the US-Mexican border and the northern Mexico is part of it. So there are three main kinds of impact that will be, possibly affecting, again, maybe communities and countries in this part of the world. So weather extremes, meaning that we will be having more hot days, or even during the night, more cold nights, depending on where we find ourselves. We will have, of course, drier moments of the year, but also rainfalls depending on where we find. So it's really an alteration again, of usual patterns of weather and climate. Then we will have environmental change and ecological disruptions in response to climate change. This is where the social science and the human part comes in, because we're going to have really not only an alteration of what is again, our surrounding the ecological environment, but also we will disrupt, in terms of health, in terms of food security, in terms of quality of air, and many other things. And then a third point is the consequences among the population, and will have also impacts which are already known and which are already detected and studied about economic dislocation, poverty, conflict situation, food, again, insecurity, as I said, and of course, psychological and health consequences. So those are things that are not, invented. There's been a lot of studies there, and we have really a huge amount of information that can confirm that. This is a very simple model, again, where we put together all these variables, the environmental conditions, social condition, and mostly in the case of northern Mexico, what is clear is that we will have very much health impacts, which probably should be taken into consideration when we do public policies toward communities and toward local communities. And we will have certainly a kind of circle process where, from climate drivers, we are going to go into impacts in different levels. So with exposure, direct and indirect exposure. Now, what will be, strictly speaking, the consequences for the northern part of the country? This is a map of a report that was recently published between Mexico and the United States over the border region. And so these are the 5 areas, again, where we should, think about how to do adaptation to climate change and how help communities somehow, in this case, when we're talking about design for vulnerables, well, think how this vulnerable community can be affected by those kind of consequences. So one is water. The second is air, then we get soil, and as I mentioned before, food safety, security, and then health. Little by little, let me talk about each one of them. So in the case of drinking water supply, as we know, there is also a war, if you want, a hidden war between the United States and Mexico now for water supplies. This is to do with also climate change, reduce of snowpack in the United States, so meaning that less water is coming from the mountains of the United States to Mexico. So when it comes to the border, we need to regulate, and you need to, to have the access to water in a different way, probably due to international cooperation or rethinking about the relation on international water border and transborder issues. So, but what we find in terms of, drinking water supply, there will be certainly saltwater intrusion, acidification, concentration of nutrient and chemical contaminants, so algae bloom and some other issues, again, that have been there for many years, but will be exacerbated, will be accelerated due to this climate change impact. In the case of air quality, well, we know this is another program that the environmental, the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States has been doing with the Mexican government in terms of, what are the cities that have most air contamination or air pollution. And it is interesting because those, as a blue circle that you see, represent actually where there is most concentration of bad air quality in the border. So we are talking about probably around 6 to 8 million people being affected by bad air quality. The other things is, as you know, air quality has a lot of potential health impacts in, creating pneumonia, asthma, allergic rhinitis. So in terms, again, of vulnerable communities here, you can really have a list of what could be the scenarios for to intervene in terms of public policy and also design, if you want. The last thing will be food safety. It has to do, with increasing of pathogens like Salmonella and many others. So this has to do again with the way we, look at or we conserve food due to rising temperatures, but also in the way we produce food. And finally, well, other issue about social impacts has to do with lifestyle and behavior, because increased temperatures already have been identified, and associated to the issue of increase in crime, accidents, decline in physical health, and many other issues. So I will pass you the presentation. You can have a look. And of course, again, these, we are in a time of pandemic, but mental health issues are also have a lot of impacts. So basically, this is what I would like to say by closing down with the last slide, and talking about, what we may use in terms of adaptation is sort of a consultative approach, having, stakeholders sitting around the same table, something that we are possibly doing, with this seminar or workshop today. And recognizing, the importance of dialogue, of course, integration among processes and among communities. So in 10 minutes, sorry, I try what I could. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for this contribution, Simone. Now I will introduce to Maria Julia Martinez. She's from the SDG initiative at TEC de Monterrey. She's a specialist in environment regulations and innovation for sustainability. She's deputy director of the SDG initiative at TEC de Monterrey, a platform that seeks to position TEC as a national and international leader in the development of innovative solutions for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Welcome, Maria Julia. If you want to share your screen, please.
Yes, thank you, Maria Elena. Good morning to all. Thank you for the invitation to this panel, Global to Local. I will talk about the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals and the impact that these objectives, these goals, can have a local and the global problems. I will share my presentation. Wait a minute, please. Okay. And share screen. Is this. Okay. Okay, the title of my presentation is the SDGs, a global agenda to respond to the local and the global challenges. Okay, yeah, you can see in in the presentation different images that represent the most relevant challenges. For example, poverty, unemployment, inequality, climate change, contamination, and all of these problems are the reality of many people and affect, and especially the most vulnerable people. The world today prospers from the fruit of the global economic growth. At the same time, it shares the fear of massive environmental degradation. Human activity has led to very real dangers such as climate change, desertification, water stress, and economic degradation. We are approaching the tipping point that is known like a planet boundaries, which are once passed will risk irreversible and abrupt environmental changes. In addition, the fruits of the economic growth are far from being shared widely. We see highly unequal distribution of income, but within and between the countries, while billions of people try to increase longevity and higher levels of well-being, the poorest of the poor continue to daily fight to survival and lacking basic level of nutrition, healthcare, shelter, and sanitation. And with these examples, we cannot support this model that exhausts our resources and destroys the environmental, because we need to the planet to live and to survive. For that reason, we have a bigger response that could be deemed as sustainable development, that is a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. This is a definition that was created, that was designed in the Commission of Environmental and Development. And right now we are working to establish this idea, this model of development to solve the global and the bigger problems of the world that we face now. But what is sustainable development implies? This model implies many different ideas. The most important is that is a shared holistic and long-term vision that countries have to agree to improve the people's lives, that people live better, that people have the same rights, the same opportunities. Also, it promotes prosperity and economic opportunity, greater social being, and protection of the environmental. That these are the three dimensions of the sustainability. For example. Also, a more just and equitable society that implies reducing inequalities and working for the most vulnerable. One of the principles of the sustainable development and also the SDGs that we are explain later is leave no one behind. Okay, for that reason, it's so important to try to implement this idea of development. And finally, the sustainable development thrive in the present, but without compromising the resources of the future, because the kids, the future generation needs the same resources that we have right now. For this reason, it's so important to conserve natural resources, to conserve the social resources also, and the economical resources, and to improve this for the future generations. What is sustainable development and why is important? This is so relevant because sustainable development is a model of development that we can maintain and support. It's right now, this is an idea that many people, that many governments, that many leaders are established, and it's important to have in mind that we can develop, that we can adopt, that we can put in practice this model. Because it is a shared, holistic, and long-term vision that countries have agreed upon to be the best path forward from improving the lives of the people in all the world. That model is based in, This model is based in the 5 Ps established by the United Nations, that is people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnership. You can see the definition of each of these Ps. For example, is end poverty and hunger in all forms in the world, Prosperity is related to the economic development, to ensure progress, to ensure growth, to ensure income from the different countries. Also, planet focus on the protection of the planet, of the natural resources, on the forests, on oceans, and many, and all biodiversity in the planet. Also, we can see partnership that implement the agenda through a solid global partnership with the participation of different actors, of different stakeholders. Sorry, and also peace, that because a world without peace, it's impossible to think in the development, to work, to accomplish the different needs that the world faces right now. For that reason, thinking in these 5 P's, the United Nations has established first the Millennium Development Goals that are known as MDGs, and then also sustainable development. They develop the Sustainable Development Goals, that are SDGs, and a target to set guidelines for the future and the optimal consensual development. First of all, I have to explain very briefly what is the MDGs. Are only 8 goals, only 8 objectives that are focused in halving extreme poverty rates, to reduce the spread of different illness like AIDS, providing universal education, focus only in the basic education to go to the basic school in all the world. And these targets had a period of time to 2015, and that is important because they help galvanize unprecedented efforts to meet the needs of the world poorest. The UN is also working with governments, with civil society, and other partners to build on the momentum generated by the MDGs. They represent the ambitious, moral, and practical commitment to improve people's lives around the world. And then, when these objectives are finished, the global association, the global actors are agreed that that target, that objective was successful, but there are many tasks to complete in the world. For example, the global number of extreme poor people decrease, but right now there are a lot of people that live in extreme poverty, and this is a issue that we have to face. Also, for example, topics related with the climate change, unless that the solar and wind power capacity grew from different quantities. Also, we have
2 minutes
right now
yes,
thank you, to produce different impacts in climate change. And for example, and then right now, what is SDGs and what are significant for many reasons? For example, because there are a roadmap to eradicate poverty, protect the planet, and ensure the inclusion and prosperity. Also because they constitute a comprehensive and multi-sectorial agenda. Also because they include the 3 dimensions of development that are economic, social, and environmental. And the main reason is because put the person in the center of the public policies that need to establish a different mechanism to change the realities. And related with the vulnerability, it's important to establish that this concept is related to the sustainability or the inability of a system to face the adverse effects of something. There are 4 kinds, like physical, economical, social, and environmental, and each of one of these are related to the SDGs. And also it is possible that local problems involve different types of vulnerability. If we solve a challenge, if we solve an issue, it is possible to impact to have a positive impact in all of the issues. And what is the most vulnerable right now? For example, is people that live in poverty and in extreme poverty, that are in hunger, that have many problems with the health, for example, poor quality of health services, also without access of education, people that live in inequality, without services of water or of electricity, without work, without house, or without access to technology.
30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. Okay, and to conclude, I want to say also that the SDGs is a new agenda to design the world, because we have a participation of the countries and different stakeholders that consider the different realities, capacities, and levels of the development of each country, and because it's put the action into the local solution to global problems. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Julia. Very important to keep in mind these 17 goals we have to reach in less than 9 years. Thank you very much. Now I will introduce you to Jeremy Cheval, our next speaker. He's a coordinator of the training pole of the Urban School of Lyon, architect and researcher, Lyon, France. He's the author of the thesis on the social and spatial transformation of Shikumen Lilong in Shanghai ancient urban entities. After working in Shanghai in architecture and urban planning offices, he taught at the College of Architecture and Urban Planning at Tongji. His current research focuses on the questions of urban metabolism and the construction processes in China. Welcome, Jeremy.
I would like to also present Maria Grace, that is with me just on the side. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm a PhD student in a co-direction in philosophy between the University of Lyon y el Instituto Nacional de Antropología e Historia en el programa Actores Sociales de la Flora Medicinal en México.
So thank you for inviting us. And we were thinking about preparing some slide presentation and so on, but we decided to put ourselves like in a vulnerable situation and try to make this presentation as a performance that do not refer directly to our research. So basically, I invited Maria Grace, who is a PhD student from Mexico. I'm a French, and we are both in France, related with Anthropocene studies in Lyon Urban School. And basically, we decided that this conversation and this talk may be something that we should have like in front of you. So basically, the first question that I want to ask, so Maria, what is for you, what is vulnerable?
So I'm a philosopher, so this is going to start deep. Vulnerability for us is to accept that we are mortals and that we are going to die. So death is vulnerability. So we are going to after define or talk about vulnerability as in a way of being closer or like closer or farthest to death. So that's the first answer. But we have a second definition of vulnerability, and that's the human vulnerability, or the normal one when we are in philosophy. That's the meaning of sense. It's a lack of sense for our actions and for our lives. The fact that we don't have, like animals, instincts. So we actually have to decide how to act and how to be. So that's a second way of understanding vulnerability. So we have to be responsible of ourselves, and we don't have any guarantees that we are actually going to make the right decision.
But from an architecture point of view, saying vulnerability would mean that a building will decay, or a building will be destroyed or deconstructed. So it means that also we're talking about decay in itself from materiality. And if we look at it from an Anthropocene point of view, vulnerability about death concern human, but also we should consider non-human when architecture is also part of this vulnerable process, architecture, design, materiality in itself. But basically, looking at this and all the global to local phenomenon that is with the Anthropocene, a major concept, how do we define the division between what is vulnerable and what is not vulnerable? So let me ask you again another question. So who draw the lines between vulnerables and non-vulnerable? How should we actually define this, according to you?
So I think it's interesting because vulnerability, it's a discussion that we are having as humans. So humans define what's vulnerable, and at least in philosophy, it's a human problem, but it's not only a human problem. Or maybe if we think about it in a different perspective, in order for us to have human life, we need a planet and we need resources to keep our very individual human lives living. So we humans draw the lines, but not all humans are equal. So.
But you have been all defining it, and you will keep on defining. And we should always find a way to look at it from a different perspective, which is very interesting to see how we draw the line. And if we look at it from a designer point of view, and if I take it as an architect, basically we have to define boundaries between spaces. That is often like creating different administration, different space between you and I, between the others and yourself. But besides, like, we draw the line about what is vulnerable and what is not, when everything is in some way. So basically, for me, like the point of view of looking at it from the Anthropocene and understanding what it means, Anthropocene is this new era, saying that the human activity on Earth intend to, if I simplify it in a very simple way, it's like the crisis of habitability on the planet. So basically it concerned living elements and not the biophysics element. So the architecture in itself is not so much vulnerable, the materiality in itself. But how and why basically should we actually define this difference between all the vulnerables? So the question I want to ask you then is like, why and who should care? Because when we define different social group, when we define who is vulnerable more than the others, what species more vulnerable than the others, saying predators, herbivore, plants, or material in itself and rocks, who is more important than the others then?
So actually, if we look at the crisis, as we were saying in the last presentation, it seems like almost nobody cares. And we have been saying this for a lot of years, and we have talked about climate change, and experts have been pronouncing on every single point, and nobody cares. And that doesn't change how people live and how people act. So I'm an ethicist. I do ethics and philosophy. So I honestly can tell you that morality is not something that works with obligation and normativity. So who should care and why should we care? We can have a reason, but that's not going to change people's behaviors. How do people behave and how do they decide? That's a different question, a long question. But I think we can decide to care and we can build knowledge to care. But to change people's behaviors, that's a hard question.
And from a designer point of view, that for me, it's like, of course we should care because humans should improve their living condition, whatever vulnerability we are going through. We have to face the environment that is changing, but we have been facing this environment changing for all the time, all ages, to fight against water, sun, wind, cold, warm, and sustain for ourselves. So basically what is for me very interesting is like as a human being and as an architect, we always try to interact with our environment to improve whatever the condition is. But the problem is like the global interaction that we induce more and more, the interaction that we create, the design that we add at the top of an interaction to another one, which makes it as a loop or makes it as something that induce something that is the climate change that we are going through, or the Anthropocene, or the great acceleration, because we don't have enough like materials, we have lacks of air, we have lack of water, we have distribution that is not enough for all the human kind on the planet. But so then, is it something that we can design? Is it something that we should work on to improve this living condition?
So yes and no. So the yes part, or no, I'll start with the negative. So the negative part is no, we cannot, because we cannot really force that. We're treating with humans, and humans are really difficult to model. And even when we do have a model, they do not follow the model. So we keep having problems to deal with humans. But as you said, what's interesting about Anthropocene is that we cannot actually divide what's local or what's individual from their effects or the effects of the decision of one single person into and we don't know the scale of the effects of the action. So that very fact that we cannot separate one decision from the effect and that we cannot prevent the effects maybe should make us care, because that means that somebody else that I don't know in another part of the world that I don't know may be doing something that will affect us. So to understand and to care about the interdependence of the system make us
Perfect.
care, and maybe we can decide that on the interdependence of the system, that maybe we can help with design.
So yes, basically, I do follow you on this, believing that we are all in interrelation, and that's what we tend to do today, and that's what we tend to do most of the time, to actually cross boundaries between our disciplines, and that's something that we should go beyond and beyond, to go towards transdisciplinary, trans point of view, trans scale, to look up, to scale up or scale down. It's all a question about this, and how do we get within these things by just being in front of you, talking about a subject that is not directly my expertise. And even I don't know you, which is very difficult for us to actually be like this and say, we don't talk about expertise. I don't take my specific subject about like Chinese social spatial transformation in the old neighborhood, which I can definitely go towards this. But it's to bring towards this fragility, this fragile exchange that we build up, because it is a different point of view. And then we go from different disciplines. And I think because whatever interaction that we create in whatever disciplines, the problem is the interrelation within these systems. And the systems, it moves, it's all in interrelation. So whatever action, it always concerns you, and everyone. So it's always very interesting to see it like a vulnerability for me sometimes as a time to actually say, so who should we care first? In some way, and second, and third, but actually it's another ecological concept, let's say, like it's not an ecosystem in itself, but it's a biophysics system that is including all of us and every human and non-human things. So basically it depends from what point of view we talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria Grace Salamanca, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you, but well, she introduced herself. I just want to say that she's from the Instituto Nacional de Antropología y Historia. She's a PhD candidate, and it's very interesting, your approach, your philosophical approach, and congratulations for making this a little bit more closer to us, taking these issues into account. Thank you very much. Now, I will introduce you to the next speaker, which is Roberto Dell'Otto from the University of Pavia, Italy. He's president of the master's degrees in Building Engineering and Architecture department. Oops, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Sorry,
sorry.
I haven't finished, sorry. Department of Civil Engineering and Architecture, University of Pavia. And in 2020, he won a Horizon 2020 grant for the project Re-Energetic. He has more than 150 scientific publications, tutoring PhD thesis and master degree thesis. So welcome, Roberto.
Thank you very much, Maria Elena. I share my screen. Well, the title of my very short presentation is regarding not specific issues, but some bookmarks that we can have in our mind when we face the issue regarding the vulnerable communities. And I would like to start from something that is quite close to what Jeremy told right now. That is an issue that I think that we are facing strongly in this time. That is the competition sometimes about the qualitative issues and the quantitative ones. So what is the storytelling and which are the numbers? Are we giving more relevance to storytelling? Are we giving more relevance to numbers? If I have to show you a list of basic issues that we are treating in this specific context, of course, the Agenda 2030 goals is a kind of storytelling. We are speaking about issues. We are defining some issues. We have some other aspects like the social inclusion. That is something that we can describe in a quite extensive way, but and it is something that we can easily understand. I can also cite the movement Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and it is something extremely connected with a kind of storytelling of some particular episodes and in the way that people considers these episodes. Another issue is the liberal narration that in the last years is strongly affected by a neo-sovereignism attitude. All of these things are usually facing another field that is the field of numbers, of quantitative issues. Of course, it is under our specific experience of the last months, the number of people infected, it is a number. The percentage of infected people for COVID-19, or the percentage of poor people in the world, the percentage of people without clean water access, and so on. We can have a list of thousands of these numerical elements. So the nature of parameters between quantitative, qualitative, subjective, and objective define the field where design or the complex systems, in other words, are usually working on, without maybe a specific orientation. So my field is strongly connected to the definition of risk. In example, risk, we have a lot of definition, and it was the key point of the previous roundtable. So I don't want to lose so much time in describing the elements, but just to give you the idea of the possible different approaches we have, from the scientific approach, the cultural approach, the psychological approach, and so on. So we can define risk, we can define vulnerability, exposition, and adaptation in different ways. So the point is, and the bookmark I would like to stress is, which is the kind of element, which is the nature of parameters that we should consider as more relevant for two main aspects, considering the fact that we are discussing about global and local. So the first one is the understanding for the non-technical citizens. Surely the community you are working on is a non-technical part of the people. So for them, the storytelling must be specifically defined, as much as the quantitative element, as much as the number has specific ways of communication. Another issue, maybe in the opposite, is the influence of governs decisions. I used to see that when a government needs to take some decision, strong decision for economy, for social issues, they are basing on quantitative and specific numbers. So quantitative targets and performance indexes are the key point for addressing the government decisions. And so the key point is, how can we keep together the storytelling, that is something that maybe non-technical people is more aware of, and the numbers that are really the basis that give reasons for the governments to take specific decisions in economy and in social issues. And I have also the experience of the Horizon 2020 research projects on the key point of the project that I'm working on is the aspect of energy. And of course, we can have a big, long and long-lasting storytelling about energy, but the key point that the European Commission wants to know is how much, so which is the percentage of use of energy that we can suppose to have as performance index. So numbers, And even if these numbers must come from a kind of storytelling, because the world is not made of technical people, is not made of mostly technical people, but is made of mostly non-technical people. And in example, I'm not technical in economy, I'm not technical in social issues, so I'm just an engineer. So I'm technical in a very few number of issues. But the relation between these two ways of communicating, and coming back to the previous slide, in the world that is made of connection among all these parameters, all these issues, that is the world of design. That means, in my field, design is the synthesis. The complex system is the union of elements and their mutual relations. So this way of communicating is also a way of synthesizing. So I'm just suggesting to the groups to keep a little attention to these bookmarks, like quantitative, qualitative, subjective, and objective elements. We know, just to finish, that the 2030 agenda is something extremely connected to qualitative elements, but also forecasts specific targets. We know also that, in example, the Kyoto Protocol was aimed to reduce 20% of the CO2 emissions within year 2020. Then they postponed in 2025, then 2030, and they diminished the target between from 20% to 15%, because some of the countries that were producing most of the CO2 were not accepting this Kyoto Protocol. So we know that numbers can change. They are not elements that have permanent value. But I suggest all the groups to keep attention to this point. Maybe some can decide to have only qualitative and subjective approaches, or some other can be more quantitative and objective. The important issue, in my opinion, is that all the people, all the students, all the people involved is aware of the nature of these elements, and is aware of the difference between storytelling and between specific numbers. I finished. I think I was in time, I hope.
Yes, Roberto, thank you very much for attaching to the 10-minute time. Very interesting how you pointed out how storytelling and numbers are making us aware or not. But thank you very much for this precise presentation. Now, we will go to the fifth presentation with Andrea Marinoni from the Arctic University in Norway. He's Associate Professor of Applied Remote Sensing in the Department of Physics and Technology in the UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Academic Fellow at the Department of University of Cambridge, UK. His main research interests are focused on efficient information extraction from multimodal remote sensing and sustainable development. He's an ambassador for IEE Region 8 humanitarian activities and a research contact point for the Norwegian artificial intelligence. Welcome, Andrea, from the North Pole. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria Elena. I try to share my screen now. Let me see. I'm sorry, just a second. Okay. Here. I guess that you now see my screen. Okay, so I would like to thank you all. Thank you, the organizers, for inviting me to this very timely initiative, because from what we heard from the previous speakers, from the extremely interesting contributions that were previously mentioned, but also from what we have learned all together from 2020, we can say that vulnerability in modern times can be addressed from several angles, from a societal point of view, from a political, environmental, financial, and healthcare and education, and so on. So I don't even go into the philosophy side, as Grace has extremely successfully done previously, but what a point that is interesting to address vulnerability will be to try to map problems that are occurring on Earth, and partly trying to investigate the data that are collected around us by all the sensors that we are surrounded by, or all the devices that we use every day, might help in mapping problems that can contribute to the vulnerability assessment of an area, region, a nation, and so on. In general, this brings a lot of issues with this, in the sense that data analysis in general has a lot of problems, as in situ measurements might be hard to organize, as different sensors might not be coherent with each other, as not all the records might be equally informative, and also sometimes the records might not be acquired at the appropriate time to catch some details for some specific physical phenomena occurring on the Earth's surface. So the result of all these issues typically is that we might have a lack of reliability of the vulnerability assessment that we can try to produce. So when trying to mapping problems on Earth, we would like the data to show high coverage in terms of space and time, so that we can catch different problems in different areas of the world in a very comprehensive way. We would like our data to be consistent and coherent, so that we can be confident in our analysis and in our investigations. We would like our data to be informative and also to be to have a very nice timeliness with respect to the different aspects that we will like to catch. This might be pretty hard, but in general, remote sensing might help. Excuse me. So, what is remote sensing? Okay, so yes, remote sensing is something like this. So is focused on the investigation of observations that are acquired by different platforms, like satellites in this case, or other platforms like airplanes or drones on the Earth's surface. These observations are acquired multiple times through the year, and so all the Earth's surface can be covered through a year multiple times, so that we can actually achieve a good understanding of all the phenomena that are occurring more or less everywhere in the world. What is important at this point is that we have to understand that these observations are not just sorry, just a second. Okay, yeah. Not just be used to, for instance, drive the weather forecast on TV, rather than to acquire images that can be used for improving Google Maps and other services in terms of transportation and navigation. What remote sensing do will be also to map very wide areas with very high level of detail, and fusing together multiple acquisitions acquired at different times. It's possible to monitor also the changes that are occurring on the Earth's surface, and also these sensors can catch also a lot of other details that cannot be seen, cannot be visible at the human eye, so that it's possible to grasp even more details about the physical phenomena that are occurring on ground. So all this is made possible by the analysis of the energy that is radiated or reflected in different portions of the electromagnetic spectrum. So by investigating these records, it's possible to obtain information on different aspects of the Earth's surface, from the physical or chemical composition of the objects on ground, from millimeter scale movement, to water quality and air quality, and also to climate change effects. So the idea is that if we are able to integrate this information with all together, we might be able to build knowledge that could be used to support and implement sustainable development in general, and in particular this vulnerability analysis that we can run. For instance, by using remote sensing, it's possible to estimate the state of vegetation and different other parameters as humidity. And so these quantities can be used to investigate how vector-borne diseases, like in this case malaria, could spread in territory, so that epidemiological studies can be run and retrieve very well and very detailed results on wide areas on the world. In terms of urban studies, for instance, the precision of modern remote sensing allows to detect warning signs in critical infrastructures, like for instance in this case, where by using remote sensing it was possible to spot millimeter scale movements in this area of London, where it was possible to show that these were warning signs for tunnel settlements. In other cases are even more critical, like for instance, it's possible to use remote sensing to monitor bridges, and it was shown that, for instance, in the last big disaster, like the Morandi Bridge or the crash of the Kolkata Bridge a few months ago, it was possible to use remote sensing to monitor this sort of infrastructure. In general, understanding characteristics of urban scenarios can lead to better characterizations of the conditions that people are living in. In this particular case, for instance, it was possible to use remote sensing to monitor and to detect and to quantify also the schools that were deployed in Colombia, and to integrate this information with their level of connectivity, in this particular case shown as in terms of average internet speed. And so it was possible to provide this sort of mapping in order to address poverty and education in wide areas. As another example, I can mention that investigating records in a specific portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, for instance in the infrared, we can retrieve information on land surface temperature that could be used on one hand to understand the thermal isolation of buildings, and on the other hand, for instance, to extract the effect of anthropogenic activities, typically summarized in terms of urban heat islands on the
Andrea, time is over. You have 1 minute left.
Okay, I just finished. Yes, and on the global warming, and so it was possible to understand the display of urban heat islands. Finally, remote sensing can be used also to analyze aerosols and water pollution, so that it's possible to retrieve even more information for air quality and water quality. So in general, these are just a few examples of how remote sensing can be used to address vulnerability in our world. But there are even more examples that can make remote sensing a key factor for sustainable development goals. And I will be able to discuss this with you later on today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Very, very interesting how these remote sensors can provide us key data for taking local decisions. So thank you very much for your contribution from the North Pole. Now we will focus on the next speaker, Cristiane Molina. She's from the Escuela de Graduados en Administración y Dirección de Empresas del TEC de Monterrey. He's a professor and researcher of the Strategy and Leadership Department at EGADE Business School and leads the Conscious Enterprise Center for Sustainable Future. She specializes in strategy and sustainability and holds a PhD degree in management and an MBA from EGADE. Welcome, Cristiane.
Thank you, Maria Elena, and thanks for inviting me to this wonderful event. I am really pleased to be here. I come from a family of architects, so I never thought that I would be from the field of business. I took a different path from my parents. So I never thought that I would be sharing what we do in the field of business to enrich what you are already doing, designing for the vulnerables. So as you can see, I will be talking about concept, consciousness, and how we are applying it to business. And you may wonder why someone from the business field, from the business school, is talking about consciousness. So let me tell you a little bit about why we are going into this direction in the business school. And I believe it's not really a global trend as it is a realization. We can see different benefits that the traditional system of capitalism has had in the globe, right? However, the system has also its limits, and we are seeing, and my colleagues have spoken about different negative effects of the way that business used to be run based on this traditional capitalist system. So globally, there have been different calls trying to move business people towards a different direction. And within the business school at Tecnológico in Monterrey, we are taking this concept of consciousness and trying to develop a whole research field and many different contents so that we can maybe transform the way in which companies and for-profit organizations are being run. So that was a little bit of an introduction of why from the business school we are talking about consciousness. I will skip the agenda because I have limited time for discussing these topics, but I would like to start talking about consciousness itself. Well, I believe that Jeremy and Maria Grace, they have spoken a little bit about humans and ethics and morality. And I would like to bring your attention to consciousness. What do we mean by consciousness? And I have a picture here of a woman who might be sleepwalking, right? So consciousness for us and how we apply it to business is opposite to someone who is kind of sleeping while performing activities every day. I don't know if maybe it has happened to you that you wake up in the morning, but you are feeling tired, and then you start dressing yourself and you end up with maybe different socks. So basically, unconsciousness would be for you to do things like routines, performing things just like because you are used to them, because they are custom. So here we're trying to raise more awareness and perception of your surroundings. We have been talking about other people, right? And caring for other people. But if I don't see them, if I don't see my surroundings, how can I care for them? Another maybe synonym is mindfulness and being mindful of others, being aware of your feelings, your emotions, your thoughts, and so on, right? So in general, we can describe consciousness and the way we are using it as an awakened state, contrary to sleepwalking. how we are applying it to business. And I would like to give you the definition that we have developed in a business school. And then I will try to maybe see what concepts we can apply to design and maybe can enrich the design process that you are going through. So for us, a conscious enterprise is one that, in addition to generate attractive returns, creates other forms of value, economic, social, but also environmental, and tries to make societies more prosperous. It's, conscious enterprise is also one that generates and distributes value among the stakeholders and considers the interdependencies. Again, Jeremy and Maria Grace have talked to us about interconnectedness, interdependence. So this second principle of conscious enterprise would highlight this interconnectedness of all human beings and all the stakeholders that we can relate to. Number three in the definition is the recognition of the intrinsic value of human people and human talent, committing to treat them with dignity and enabling their flourishment. And finally, we think that conscious enterprise is one that is responsible to contribute to regeneration. We are no longer talking about avoiding doing harm. We are trying to get companies to be more proactive and commit to do good. So let me maybe explore some of these principles and how I see that they can apply to design as you are doing in this wonderful initiative. So first one is returns and value in terms of the society, the impact on society, the impact on the environment, and obviously in the economy. So first I would like to say, well, in these processes of design, trying to improve the lives of others, as we have been talking, maybe trying to solve problems, as Maria Julia and Simone were talking about a while ago, we must not forget feasibility and the financial feasibility of the projects, right? In the end, if we don't ensure this feasibility, the lives of the people will not be actually improved. The projects will not be able to be deployed. And here, I would like to also maybe recognize that value has different definitions. We humans may have different interpretations. So we need to be really close to what value means for the persons that we're working with. And I believe that these first principles are strengthened with the second, because we focus on the second, we focus on stakeholders and the sharing the value and being aware of their interconnectedness. So here I will encourage everyone to start thinking about who are the stakeholders of the design project, of the project that you are working with, and think about who can affect the project and who is affected by the project. For example, if we are building a household, maybe we are talking to the head of the family, but everyone who's going to live in the household is going to be affected by the design of this household itself. So, and also maybe these people, some of them might be silent, some of them might be in the periphery. So we need to be really good at identifying them, trying to map as many stakeholders as possible. Then once we understand who they are, we can proceed to ask them what they want. What is their claim? What are their needs and what are their wants? Because we need to make sure that we understand that, so that the result of the project is beneficial for the majority of the stakeholders. And finally, the how. In the past, maybe the treatment to stakeholders was focused on transactions. Maybe you hire me for a design and then I give you the floor plans for your house and so on. But here we're talking about building personal ties, building profound relationship with the stakeholders, trying to engage with them and avoid maybe just staying in the public relations and negotiation where we don't see the parties as equal. So more engagement, more personal ties is how we are trying to build these stakeholders.
2 minutes, Cristiane.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Then I have the human dignity and flourishing. side. So application for design, I would say the relevance of the public spaces. I have seen that you are working in different areas of the lives and different spaces where the community is living every day. So that's highly relevant. And I would say also trying to let people express their identities, right? Human dignity and my ability to express my identity, I don't know, maybe through the use of the colors that are preferred by the people and so on. And again, tied to the stakeholder principle, co-creating and co-designing with the stakeholders. That will be an interesting approach that could be tied to this thing as well. The fourth one is regeneration. As I said, we are no longer talking about not doing harm, but we are trying to do good and trying to build systems that regenerate the nature, right? So here, maybe, I don't know, you are the experts on that, but materials that bring the nature and are less harmful to the environment could be some things that you can think about. And finally, well, to close my presentation, I also wanted to bring the sustainability side. And for sustainability, Maria Julia has talked about the objectives for sustainable development, but we must not forget the importance of partnerships. Traditionally, I believe what we have seen, or we have been trying to solve the problems ourselves, right? But for solving the problems that we have been speaking about today, or talking about today, we need to work together. There is no single actor that is left aside. So partnerships are essential for us to be able to reach sustainable development in terms of, for example, the Sustainable Development Goals. So here, I encourage you to think about compatibility. Am I compatible with my partner, with my ally? What do we bring to the alliance? Maybe we're focused on just sharing some ideas, but what do I bring that is different from what my partner brings to the table? Are our goals aligned? Do we have the same objectives? And finally, how is the relationship going to change? So again, well, I hope that these thoughts and these concepts are useful for you. I believe that you are doing wonderful things that we can learn from in the business school. So thank you very much for your attention. I will be looking forward to the work during the workshops. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Cristiane, for your very interesting talk and attaching to the 10-minute schedule. And it was very interesting how you interweave different ideas from the perspective of business and economics. I think it's very interesting in contributes of how can we make projects to regenerate our environment. So now we're approaching to the end, but not the less important. We have two speakers from Italy, from ILAUD. It's Paolo Ceccarelli and Pilar Guerreri. Paolo is professor of the Faculty of Architecture of the University of Ferrara, which he founded in 1992. He was director of the University Institute of Architecture of Venice. He's the president of the International Laboratory of Architecture and Urban Design, ILAUD, director of the Center for Urban Territorial and Research, and coordinator of the Doctorate in Regional Economics at the University of Ferrara. He has extensive international teaching experience, such as at Waseda University in Tokyo, at the MIT in Massachusetts, at the Universities of California, Berkeley, and Santa Cruz, and numerous European universities. He has conducted research at the Center of European Studies and the Center for Urban Studies at Harvard University and MIT. He has directed numerous works on the industrial and urban development of central and northern Italy. He's the author of numerous books and essays that have been translated into various languages, as well as having directed and being a member of scientific of numerous Italian and international urban planning journals. And as well, Pilar Guerreri, also from ILAUD, Italy. She's lecturer of History of Architecture at Politecnico di Milano, an affiliated researcher at Ambedkar University in Delhi, India. She's the author of the book Maps of Delhi, Delhi's Architecture and Planning from 1912 to 1962. So we welcome you. I'm very glad to hear you.
Thank you very much. Paulo, exactly. I'm just waiting for him. I can't see him anymore. Can you?
Yeah, he's there, but he's muted.
Oh, let me tell him.
The host may press the button that says ask to unmute. I think that might help.
Wait a second.
That's okay.
Am I connected? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for the initiative that I think is very interesting and important. And I hope you will be able to develop further your work on these important issues. Anyway, my intervention will be very rapid. I want just to inform you about a number of programs that ILAUD is developing and that are in some way strongly connected of the work you are doing. And they are at the same time strongly connected with the issue of being at the same time local and global and trying to find solutions that are in some way useful for solving specific local problems in a larger framework, both geographical and in connected with the changes occurring in time, especially in a moment like this, where you have processes very contradictory developing all over the world, and many times you don't understand what's going on and what can be done. Anyway, so what we are trying to do is to experiment a number of work done in very strong connection with local communities of different types in different areas. ILAUD traditionally worked very much at an international level and has operated in China, in Japan, in India, in Africa, in Latin America, and so since 2019, obviously we were then stopped by COVID-19 and we were forced to work mostly online. But we did not give up and we decided to continue to work on some issues connected with different places in the world, using as much as we can the computers and the web. So now we are working on 3 different projects. 2 are more advanced and 1 is under consideration. The first one is a program that is based on 3 different cities in Europe, that is Milano, London, and Berlin, in 3 areas that are rather marginal in the 3 metropolis, and areas which have a number of problems that are, and we can call in some way, problems connected with vulnerability. So rather marginal, with problem of unemployment, with the groups of migrants living there, standard of, I must say, open spaces and facilities not so good. In some way, the usual things you find in marginal areas in the cities. And the idea is, and that is very important, to work in very strong and strict connection with the local communities to face a number of issues that will be very soon, they are already in some way existing, but that very soon will become more serious because of climate change and the effect of the pandemic that are producing very serious economic crisis at different levels, at different types, and are also creating sort of more permanent health problems and problems of cooperation among the different groups. In some way, pandemics are creating a number of problems. I don't need to mention the ones that you probably know even better than me, that will last for a long time. So the problem that we will explore is in some way a double problem. From one side, the problem of improving the ability to resist to this, to sort of how can we increase in a stage of this type the resilience both of the community and the individuals in the community. I think that that is very important, because unless we are able to recover a number of capacities that individuals and the communities have to resist to change, and to capitalize on these abilities that many times is a traditional ability connected with different cultures of the different groups, will be unable then to have the other step, that will be the step of innovation and change for the future. So in some way we must be able to revive, even if the moment is not so good, but using that as a moment for mobilizing people, to use the improvement of resilience, both in the community and of the different subjects, to give again the ability to react and resist, and try to reorganize this in a strategy. The second step, obviously, is to innovate. And in this case, I think that a number of work of action are planned in cooperation with the local community and the different groups of the local community, especially with youth, but also with different ethnic groups living there, to imagine activities that are economic, social, cultural, and so on, that starting from the need to face a changing environment, can in some way invent new answers to the urban life. For instance, one of the projects we are considering, that the case of the study for the area in Milano, is strongly connected with the Green Deal program of the European Union for redeveloping on different bases forms of agriculture and food production in urban areas. That means not only something that in some way will be important for many reasons there is no need to mention, but also because forces to rediscover some elements that were very important in the traditional urban life that were in some way forgotten. So in some way, it's a way of rediscovering things that existed, were important, and were forgotten. The second line of work instead is on small villages in marginal areas in central Italy, in the mountains, where again you have to rediscover and reinforce the identity that some of these small communities had, that were very important because they were very skilled in doing a number of things. I think that you have probably some of the same problems in the case you are working now in Guadalajara, with communities that were able to produce something that is unique or was unique, and there are no more markets for that, but the markets can be again reinvented or reorganized using new technologies of communication and things of this kind. So to recreate even new forms of entrepreneurship And that again means new form or reorganization of activities for the youth, new forms of education to elderly people, to the new technologies of communication and computers and so on. So in some way, to recreate again, starting from the identity of a place and from the human resources to have a base for fighting against the marginalization and trying to reinvent a role. I think that this again is important. It's very important to give again, and that is corresponds to many of the goals of the agenda, the 2030 agenda, to give again the person living in an area the sense that they can have a role, they can play in some way a positive function in the society. And to do that is very important. Even the solution will be different types and so on. By the way, this thing is extremely important. This kind of experience is connected with another very important goal we are trying to pursue with the ILAUD, is the fact that we need to educate the new group of architects and urban planners that will be operating in the future as main actors for fighting against the climate change, the crisis produced by the economic decline and things of this kind, that at present are not prepared by the university to do that. There is a sort of tremendous gap in between what we know will be one of the basic needs in the next future for giving answer to the problems the Anthropocene will face, and the education that the school are still providing. The third line of work, I hope that I'll be able to start that project, is instead connected to a very and totally different kind of human settlement that at the same time is becoming more and more important in the world. So it's the settlement of migrants, the settlement of temporary workers that live in terrible conditions and are increasingly becoming important in some regions of the world because of the wars, because of the drought, because of the scarcity of food and so. And the new cities that are created by that. I think that Mexico has a tremendous experience from that point of view. Now, when you think at the life of the migrants, of the Chicanos in Latinos in California or in some part of Mexico. And again, these areas are very important because there are lots of people living there and very vulnerable. And vulnerable in a totally different way from the other ones. But are a large part of, there are millions of people around the world who are living now in conditions of this kind. And in Italy, we have a serious problem posed by migrants coming from Africa and by temporary workers in agriculture, like the Latinos in California. So, and the condition of them and the form of life and the new communities that have been formed by these processes are extremely important to be studied because they give you a number of further suggestions of how to face crisis and how to imagine solutions to them. So that's it, what we are trying to do. I hope we can keep in touch even in the future for cooperating on this and hoping that in the future we can, as ILAUD was used to do, to exchange students, to have some of your students coming to work with us or vice versa, having some of ours coming to Mexico or in Latin America, and to work together on some specific concrete cases and learning with local people and discussing with them and finding together solutions to the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ceccarelli. It was very interesting that you share us your wisdom and experience on the challenges that we are facing now in all the worldwide, but especially in Mexico and special places. With this, we finish our round of this session of speakers, and now you will have the breakup rooms coordinated by Emanuele. So for me, I say goodbye to everyone. Thank you very much for sharing these very interesting different points of view. And it was very nice to meet you and see you with these digital means. Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Maybe we can invite also Pilar if she wants to share something.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I was planning just to maybe share with you an example of a very interesting case study of a design for vulnerables in India, which I think it may inform the platform in some way, because the example is very relevant. So I'm going to be very brief, but I'm going to show you this example. I think you may be able to see it. Are you?
Yes.
Okay. So I have been actually living in India for almost 9 years, where the topic of vulnerables is very much present. First of all, because probably if I give you a figure, in 2017, they have made research and discovered that 1/3 of India lived in cities, and 25% of these were actually living in slums, so in informal housing. And not just, I mean, the topic of vulnerables is not just related to slums, but also, for example, to villages. I mean, there are many, many villages in India that are perishing because most people are, the younger especially, are moving away from the villages and moving back to, I mean, moving to cities to find a better job or a better opportunity. So, I mean, I think India as a case study and as a sort of counterpoint from Mexico, it's quite interesting. And India has a very interesting story because slums, I'm just going to be able to focus on slum. Of course, there's not enough time to speak about villages and vulnerables in villages. But in terms of slums, the slums actually developed in particularly around the mid-20s, when there was the passage from the British to independence. And their slums have been growing very much. One of the reasons was also partition. So a huge amount of flooding migrants reached India and reached cities, and they have been settling down in these kind of settlements. Actually, what happened at the beginning, they were seen as a liability. So they settled down in city centers, and then they had to be removed according to the government. So the first, the planning approach was to take these vulnerables and to bring them in the outskirts of town. Then after this was happening almost around from the 70s and 80s. Then some studies, proof that the people were actually moving into the new modern government houses in the outskirts. They were moving there, but then they were very soon renting out the place and going back to the slums. And it created a huge debate on why these people were actually given a home, and then they were going back to the slums and renting out the home that it was given to them. So they have made a very interesting chart showing that priorities were very different for these people. So if you displace somebody from the city center and you put them in the outskirts, you generate a huge amount of problems in sort of reaching the job. So very often the job was very nearby to the city center slum. So that was creating also an isolation of the women and a series of other problems. So the people were prioritizing and giving out the home, living in shacks, but maybe have a little extra money to work on a better education or better healthcare. So they've changed completely, radically the policy. So they decided in the 90s and 20s not to move anymore the people in the outskirts because it was a failure, but to keep the people right in the city center and to develop a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 policy. So they decided to keep the city center area where the slum was cleared up, clear the area and give 2/3 to the developers and 1/3 squeeze in all the poor slum dwellers. So this has changed completely the proportion of the slum dwellers. So all of these people that were horizontally living, they were squeezed in these little towers of 25 square meters for a family of 5 to 7 people. So the relationship with the ground was not there anymore. And this has somehow, again, created a series of debates. So what happened is that there was this very interesting school that have worked on the idea of a barefoot architect, and in particular on the idea of working on different habitats. In fact, it was called habitat studies, trying to confront these issues on how to resettle and how to work on slums. And they actually came out with a very interesting solution. They've said that actually there is no additional value that an architect can give, if only just the fact that he can think with no cost. So they made a series of experiments on how to work on slums with absolutely no additional cost. And then there is one fellow, which then was a fellow of the school, that then was somehow given a real project when he was a grown-up architect, which is this Katputli. This is a very central area where there was a slum in Delhi. So this is the city center, the project of Latians. I don't know if you're familiar. So this was the area. So quite 2.22 hectares. And there was a community, very interesting community of puppet makers, designers, different craftsmen of all sorts. And there was a huge debate on what to do. And these Neeraj Marchandra, which was a fellow of the TVB school, have given a sort of a new different solution. So this was the condition in which this colony was at the beginning of the project. And of course, here you can see from the government documents that it was an in situ project of redevelopment and not a displacement. And here the DDA, so the Delhi Development Authority, worked with the architect. And look what happened. He had decided to give 1/3 to the private developers and not 2/3, and to give the 2/3 to the people. And what they have done, I'm going to quickly show it to you. So all the land was actually given to the slummers, and the tower was actually given to the private developers. And he had been trying to rethink the relationship with the street. So all the street was organized by looking at traditional urban settlements, by creating areas where these craft makers could actually continue their work actively, both at the ground floor. And here you can see some provision for shops and households. And also, as you can see, some ground for playing grounds. And the location is also adapted for climate, so it's allowing a lot of air passing through with the winds. And only doing 4 floors. So the idea was to have just 4 floors, so the government says that you can just walk for 4 floors and not having elevator. So creating a sort of integration between peoples and community, and then making a road also at the 4th floor, so that you can just reach with the elevators only at the 4th floor. You can't reach with the elevator at the homes. So recreating the relationship with the street. And here you can see the way, this has been developed. So the idea that this is a road, and then from the 4th floor up to the 8th, you also again have to walk. So I find that this is a very interesting example of how to reimagine a slum, high density but low rise, compared to what usually the government has been doing. So I think this is just an interesting interaction with between architect, government, and local community, because the community has been very much involved in deciding all the functions and what they need, the charts, the spaces for community interaction and sellers and so on. So this was just something. I mean, he have also been adding very interesting traditional aspects, like the otta, which is this space, in between space that is in traditional Indian houses, where you actually have a sort of semi-private space that is not part of the house and not just part of the community, but is a sort of mid space. So a whole work of trying to find a middle ground between the community and the development. So thank you very much. I hope that was somehow helpful.
Thank you, Pilar. It was very, very interesting, very amazing to
Brava,
see all
Pilar.
of these interventions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, Marilyn, thank you very much for moderating this roundtable. Really very interesting for the topics. And now we have 20 minutes. If you agree, we prepare some breakout rooms with the working groups, and you as experts are invited to join these rooms. You can discuss about the project, some doubts about the presentation and so on. Then if you finish to discuss and you want to join some other groups, please just let me know, and you can move to another group. I think that now everybody already have the invitation to join the
I have to join today. Start to put here. See.